Qatar. A name shorter than many perfume brands, but carrying more symbolic weight than entire advertising catalogs. When you look at the map, you see a tiny peninsula sticking out of the Arabian Peninsula. But when you turn on the TV, scroll through social media, or watch coverage of a global sporting event, suddenly it turns out that Qatar is everywhere. How is that possible? How did a country smaller than a Polish voivodeship manage to build a brand that the whole world recognizes? The answer lies in advertising, but not the kind of advertising we know from Poland, France, or the United States. In Qatar, advertising is not an add-on. It's not a campaign. It's not a momentary burst of noise on a billboard or a few seconds of airtime during a match. Here, advertising is the language of national strategy. It's a tool in the game of geopolitics. It's an instrument for building identity. The West often asks, is this propaganda? But that's the wrong question. In Qatar, advertising is not propaganda in the clumsy, heavy-handed sense we know from 20th century history. It is something else. A story so carefully designed, so aesthetically refined, so coherent that it becomes the foundation of the national brand. Every billboard, every spot, every event is a brick in building the image of Qatar as a country that not only exists, but deserves to be at the center of the world. And here the fascinating paradox begins. Because in Qatar there is no such thing as a free advertising market. Not because someone banned it, but because advertising in the classic sense simply doesn't make sense. In a state where 10% of the population are citizens and 90% are expats, where luxury mixes with tradition and religion with modernity, you cannot sell anything by shouting, "Sale, discount, buy now." That would not just be ineffective, it would be offensive. That's why in Qatar, advertising is a whisper, a subtle invitation, an emotional architecture that has to be designed so carefully that it doesn't offend the emir, the grandmother in niqab, or the child studying in Education City. Advertising is not a transaction, it is a social ritual. And when we look at Qatar from the outside, we see luxury cars, new stadiums, cutting-edge museums, richest countries in the world rankings. But only when we peek inside the world of Qatari marketing do we begin to understand that here everything, absolutely everything, is advertising. Not just the billboard, but also the light on a building facade, the color of the tablecloth at an event, a line of poetry placed in a museum, even the silence in TV spots where the desert says more than 1,000 words. In this series, we've shown different faces of Qatari marketing, from elite shopping carried out in the silence of palace showrooms, through women's and men's events, all the way to campaigns aimed at expats, the overwhelming majority of residents. From influencers who don't exist without a state license to monumental events like the 2022 World Cup, which became the most expensive billboards in history. And now it's time to go one step further, to understand that Qatar doesn't advertise products. Qatar advertises itself. And that if you want to enter this market, budget, creativity, and algorithm skills are not enough. You have to know the code, the cultural code, the aesthetic code, the emotional code. Because in Qatar, advertising doesn't say buy. It says remember us, understand us, acknowledge us. In Qatar, the notion of a free advertising market in the Western sense simply doesn't exist. Not because of censorship, but because most messaging isn't commercial advertising at all. It's part of national strategy, geopolitical play, and state branding. In Qatar, advertising is a tool of diplomacy, a pathway for investment, an instrument of soft power, and very often, a smokescreen for state sponsorship. Who controls the media space? Not Facebook, not Google. In Qatar, 3 types of institutions rule the message. Qatar Media Corporation, QMC, controls radio stations, television and outdoor advertising, manages licenses for media companies and influencers, has the right to ban broadcasts, block content, pull campaigns. Government Communications Office, GCO, sets strategic priorities for state messaging, publishes guidelines for domestic and foreign PR, coordinates promotional activity with embassies and think tanks. Qatar Foundation, Qatar Museums, Aspire Zone Foundation. Cultural and educational institutions that organize events, exhibitions, and campaigns, but their goal is not profit. These are tools of soft power, funded 100% from public money. Where does the money come from? Most of the advertising you see on Qatari streets, in malls, on social media, in apps and museums does not come from private marketing budgets. It's often grants from the state, funding from strategic funds, money from the ministries of culture, education, investment, or Islamic affairs, state sponsorship channeled through quasi-government institutions. Example: a fashion event in Qatar Cultural Village is not a Chanel campaign. It's an event paid for by Qatar Creates, which invites Chanel to help build the image of Qatar as the new capital of high culture. State media as a channel for national advertising Qatar TV. Al Rayyan, Al Kas. These TV channels broadcast ads promoting local products, spots about national values, educational campaigns on lifestyle, health, religion, family, films promoting foreign and domestic investment. But notice, they never show aggressive marketing. You won't see chips on sale, yogurt ad with a celebrity, Black Friday madness. Here, advertising is the backbone of a national narrative. Elegant, soft, crafted as if by an ambassador, not a salesman. Sponsorship, advertising hidden in the structure of institutions. In Qatar, a huge part of promotion flows through football matches, Al Sadd, Al Duhail, Emir Cup, scientific and tech events, Web Summit Qatar, Expo 2023, cultural festivals, Ajal Film Festival, Qatar National Day, social campaigns, education, mental health. Brands appear as logo sponsors, technology partners, creators of experience zones, co-organizers of inspirational talks. But it's the state that controls the form, the message, the emotional tonality. Where is the line between strategy and propaganda? That question keeps coming back, especially for Western analysts. Is Qatari advertising propaganda? The answer is not in the classical sense. It's a strategic national narrative where the point is not to convince you to buy, but to build a coherent image of Qatar as modern, proud, hospitable, religious, innovative, independent. Advertising here doesn't serve sales, it serves identity. Side effect: the private market benefits from proximity to the state. If your brand works with Qatar Foundation, appears at an event under the Emir's patronage, has obtained approval from QMC, then you don't really need a paid campaign. Your presence in official spaces works like a prestige seal. That's why so many foreign brands try to enter through the public sector, not through media agencies. And what about brands that don't cooperate with the state? They have it harder. They're not invited to big events. They don't get prime billboard locations. They have limited options for targeting local elites. And often they have to make up for it with budget, not narrative. In Qatar, disloyalty in communication means isolation. This is a system of relationships, not algorithms. In summary, Qatar doesn't just control the message. Qatar is the message. Every spot, event, article, mural is part of a story written by state institutions and consumed with fascination by the world. It's the most strategic national marketing project of the 21st century. Without sloganeering, without shouting, without cheap tricks. Because here, advertising doesn't say, "Look at us." Here, advertising says, "Ask yourself why you can't stop looking at us." How do you enter the advertising market in Qatar? Entering the Qatari advertising market is not a sprint. It's a pilgrimage. With a prayer for aesthetics, cultural sensitivity, and patience no MBA will ever teach you. Knowing algorithms is not enough. Having a New York portfolio is not enough. Speaking English is not enough. You have to understand the narrative code of a country that doesn't shout but speaks in a whisper, and a whisper with a pedigree. Basic rule: don't start from reach, start from respect. In Qatar, big splash entry doesn't work. What does work is showing up at the right event, meeting the right local partner, proposing something that won't just make money, but will contribute to the country. In practice, instead of advertising your agency, you take part in Qatar Creative Industries Week, sign up as a partner for a Qatar National Day project, make contact with Qatar Foundation or Qatara Studios, create a case study of local narrative, how Bedouin codes inspire future branding, and send it to local media. Who do you need to know, or at least look like you know? In Qatar, nothing happens without networks. Your agency may be brilliant, but if you don't have a contact in Qatar Media Corporation, someone linked to Qatar museums or Qatar sports investments, or at least a recommendation from a local university or embassy, you're just another email in the inbox. The solution? Hire a local PR specialist, show up at closed seminars like MENA Brand Forum, build a bridge with Lebanese, Egyptian, or Jordanian firms that already have access to Doha. Registration and formalities. To legally run marketing and advertising operations in Qatar, you'll need an MOCI license, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, for advertising activity, authorization from Qatar Chamber or another local sponsor, a local representative, foreign companies have limited room to move without a sponsor, a media license for video, audio, influencer content. And if you want to work with influencers, they must have a media license. You must submit a budget and content declaration. Approval has to be issued before publication. What style works? Don't try to copy American more is more. In Qatar, what works is minimalism and poetry, local symbolism plus global quality, slow-motion rhythm and multi-generational narratives, Bedouin, Islamic, geometric, and architectural inspirations. Instead of, your brand deserves to shine, say, a story that belongs where heritage meets the future. Instead of, buy now, 50% off, say, selected, elevated. Quietly yours? What can you offer to be needed? It's worth asking. What can I bring to Qatar that it doesn't already have? Western narrative adapted to the Gulf Code, UX and technology in service of elegance and ethics, ESG-style campaigns in a cultural, not activist key, tasteful creativity without cheap provocation, and above all, loyalty to the country and its culture. For state contracts, your past media behavior is often checked. One bad tweet, not invited, not admitted, forgotten. What must you absolutely not do? Don't try to enter through the back door via random overseas influencers. Don't create overly literal ads. Don't use religion in your messaging if you're not from the region. Don't photograph mosques for campaigns without permission. Don't copy Dubai's style. That's a different planet. The alternative route, education and culture. If you don't have millions but you have knowledge and taste, try entering through education, webinars, courses, books like Design and Identity in the Gulf, culture, co-projects with museums, scholarships and youth mentoring in Qatar youth programs, expert podcasts, for example, on narrative storytelling. In Qatar, a skilled storyteller is valued more than a flashy graphic designer. Tell a story, inspire, build emotion. Sales will come later. In summary, there's no such thing as simply entering the advertising market in Qatar. You can, however, be invited into the narrative. And if you enter well, you're in for good. If you enter badly, no one will ever call you back. Here you don't sell through aggression. You sell through identity, ritual, and relationships. And even if you have the best campaign in the world, if you don't understand Qatari's silence with pride, you won't sell a thing. What does the street say when the campaign falls silent? When the billboard lights go off, when the influencer returns to their villa, and the LED screen above the entrance to Al Hazm goes dark, what's left is what can't be measured in reach or clicks. Respect, emotion, a silent yes or no. Because in Qatar, the most important advertisement is the one that doesn't say anything. It's the look of a father at a poster with his son, It's a mother's reaction to a family campaign where nothing is said explicitly. It's a grandmother's delight at the light on a mural that reminds her of a pre-war textile. The city after the campaign? Misread empties out after Ramadan. Banners disappear. What remains is the color of the walls, and a sentence carved in stone. If you want to build the future, remember the desert. And that's the most powerful advertisement of all. Not the one that shouts, but the one that settles in the city's psyche. The audience is not a crowd. It's a community. In Qatar. There is no target group in the Western sense. There are contextual communities, whispered through WhatsApp, implied by being present at an event, built by faith, family, roots. And every campaign, even the smallest, becomes part of a larger puzzle. And you? What do you leave behind? If you ran a campaign but left no emotion, you did nothing. If you had a spot with drones but no one remembers the message, you might as well not have existed. But if your light, your poetry, your silence were remembered in the stillness of a desert evening, then you've entered the soul of Qatar. And you'll stay there. When we started this series about Qatar, it might have seemed like it would be a story about luxury brands, premium influencers, and stadiums worth billions of dollars. But the further we went, the clearer it became that this isn't a story about products. It's a story about a state that has turned advertising into its language of existence. Because in Qatar, advertising is not sales, it's identity. Identity that has to be visible at every step. In streets lit with golden light instead of screaming neon. At events where silence and symbolism weigh more than loud slogans. In media that don't show promotions on crisps, but spots about family, education, and dignity. Every detail, from the calligraphy on a mural to the slow-motion shot in a Qatar Airways commercial, is a fragment of the story the country wants to leave the world. And that is where Qatar's strength lies. Because advertising here doesn't ask, will we sell more? It asks, will you remember us? And the world did remember. After the 2022 World Cup, Qatar was no longer just a gas country or a transit point in the Gulf. It became a new center of narrative, a symbol that you can be small and still play at the level of giants. But that comes at a price. In Qatar, there is no advertising freedom, no creative chaos like we know from the West. Here, advertising is controlled, guided, curated. Not everyone has access to it. Not everyone can be an influencer. Not every brand is allowed to appear. It's a system of loyalties in which what counts is not only the product, but also who you know, which community you belong to, what story you carry with you. The West will say, that's a limitation. Qatar will answer, that's harmony. The West will say, that's propaganda. Qatar will answer, that's strategy. And the truth is, both sides have a grain of truth. Because this series about Qatar was never only about Qatar. It was about the future of advertising. Looking at Qatar, we see where the premium world is heading. Less shouting, more narrative, less mass targeting, more selection, less buy now, more remember who you are and where you belong. And maybe that's why this story matters so much. Because it shows that the advertising of the future will not just be a game of algorithms and data. It will be a game of values, cultural codes, loyalty, and, paradoxically, silence. In Qatar, the most powerful advertisement is the one that says nothing. A billboard that doesn't scream, an event that doesn't have to be filmed, a whisper that runs through palaces faster than any TikTok viral. It's advertising that doesn't end with a click. It ends with a decision, yes or no. And that decision is not always visible right away. Sometimes it comes a week later, a month later, sometimes a generation later. So as we close this series, one thing is clear. Qatar didn't just create advertising. Qatar created a narrative system of existence in which every detail, from perfume to stadium, is part of a single message. We exist. and you have to see us. And the question left for all of us is this: will the future of global advertising follow Qatar's path? Will the world start selling fewer products and more stories? Will we hear less of the scream of discounts and more of the whisper of identity? Qatar is already doing it. The rest of the world is still learning. If you've made it this far, it means Qatar intrigued you. It means this journey through a world of advertising that is poetry, diplomacy, and a game of identity was worth your time. And that's exactly why I have a favor to ask. This channel is a project designed to show the world places and mechanisms people rarely talk about. Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Palestine. We're weaving all these stories into a series that is not propaganda, not cheap sensation, but an attempt to understand. If you want more content like this, hit subscribe. For you, it's just one click. For us, it's a signal that it's worth going further. If this episode stirred something in you, leave a like. It's not just numbers. It's a sign that long, demanding, different from the rest content still has meaning in a world dominated by memes and short clips. And if you know someone who's interested in the Middle East, who wants to know what life in the region really looks like, beyond what headline news shows in fragments, send them this episode. Because this series doesn't end here. Soon we'll dive into more cultural codes, more paradoxes, more mechanisms that show the Middle East is not just oil and sand, but a laboratory of the future. Subscribe, that's your ticket for this journey. Like, that's your support. Comment, that's your voice in this conversation. And us? We promise you one thing. We'll keep telling these stories in a way that makes you feel you're stepping into a world you won't see on CNN or TikTok. Because this isn't about views. It's about letting you, even for a moment, see the world through the eyes of the people who really live here.